get that essentially the disappearing and reappearing buildings are probably meant to give them a sense of eeriness, essentially, and were probably disguised precisely, for what their purpose is in the broader scope of things, essentially, like where something a ordinary straight person would be interested in is concerned, like in a tunnel leading through the Blue Mountain out west in Pittsburgh, there was a maintenance freaking area that only certain personnel is supposed to enter. And then there is a workers area, above essentially the Blue Mountain, essentially where there was a parking lot that other people could enter through. And there used to be a particularly high-class fucking brothel there, actually underground. Now, if they're doing that, you know what else they're doing. It means that they're also hosting fucking goddamn child rape events in these fucking places. Because that's really what they want to be doing in the first place. So, the purpose of hiding something, essentially, that makes sense, okay? Misrepresenting it to people who have no interest in what they're interested in, that also makes sense, because that person essentially, if they're already not really in a place where they can do anything about anything anyway, making something seem more, I should say, acceptable, acceptable, to an ordinary person, is a way of keeping them from talking about it. The problem is what they're doing is not acceptable, because there's a dual purpose to this. It's also to keep people essentially confused neurologically. Okay, I want you to imagine this, all right? So I'm a kid, and I go to Fort Collins, Colorado, which I did as a child, all right? It's the place where I was raped, okay? And I see them constructing a pavilion, and there's this I don't remember if this was the year that something happened to me or not, but I see them constructing a fucking, say for example, a pavilion, and there's this, they're actually digging the foundation, so on and so forth for it, laying the cinder block or cinder block down, and beginning to reach that point of it where there's a retaining wall being put up, okay, in a patch of street which they've opened up, okay. Now, so I see that, and then I also see essentially this flat, circular freaking roundabout that's made out of concrete that has a bunch of footprints and shit drawn on it, stuff like that. And that. Anyway, nice tattoo on her stomach. Anyway, apparently some nice tits written up there too. I'm desensitized to the rest of the shit at this particular point, so stress is making me kind of. Anyway, same girl too. Same girl as the last time I made this video. So the other problem is confusing the victim class, or confusing people in general, alright? Now imagine you forget about all this because you're a kid. And you forgot the entire incident anyway because, well, it's horrible. Like children have a tendency to do, which did happen to me. Alright? So I grew up my whole life with my piece of shit fucking father, knowing he was an asshole, just not knowing how much of an asshole he was. Okay? So, that piece of garbage, speaking of pieces of garbage, there's a whole bunch of them right here, So, that piece of fucking garbage, alright, goes out of his way to cover this shit up for me. But I do witness those things while I'm there at one point, during a time period where we just appear to be just, living there during the summer. We travel all the way from PA and go on fucking walk about, so to speak, and, we visit and we stay different places each time. We don't really enter the town much, but enough to see certain things. Say for example that extension or I should say bathroom that was built in a Starbucks downtown, for example. Just seeing it go up, not actually going into it, thankfully for me. Anyway, so as a young man, I return, or not so young man, like in my late 20s, I return to this place and I see this exact same shit getting built up, you know? At one point, however, I return there and it's not there. At all. I mean at all. All streets open. There's a fucking toy shop downtown, essentially, where the Ben & Jerry's is. The street itself is not closed off yet. Okay? Well, they started to close the street off. It's off of, what is that? It starts in Linden Road. Alright. So, on a few occasions I return there and there's building this shit. Now, can you imagine how disorienting that is? But you see, the joke's on them is that the longer essentially a person is alive and starts to see this shit, once the explanation is rendered to them and they believe that they have seen the thing, for example, it starts storing information against these events. Now, they have a way of essentially screwing with somebody because, you know, the mind isn't cued by things that aren't there or in a different state altogether. All right, a different state of affairs altogether. So, if I had been victimized there, it's a question of a very long time ago. It's about going to the same place. If I have repressed the fucking memories, like I did the last time I made this video, because they dragged me out fucking west, essentially, and they arrested me illegally, and they fucking stole all my shit, and they fucking deleted a whole bunch of shit and everything else, and it brought me back through here, where everybody still is. To where if they have particularly pissed me off at one particular point, you know, it'd be all too easy to do something to them, you know. Well, they haven't particularly pissed me off here that much. Good for them. Bad for me. Anyway, so, other people doing the same shit, for example. The other thing is that they replace people with, they reduce people down to clothing styles and shoe styles and sunglasses, eyeglasses, and fucking body type and relative weight. Like overweight, not overweight, things like that, okay? By doing that, they can put different people in the same spots, and it gives the idea that, oh, they never left, blah, 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 and sometimes they just assign different names to them over a long period of time. Usually the first name is both being used and the like, so it's all about deniability. But you see, this would confuse the fuck out of somebody like it did me at one point, because I returned there, and at Armstrong Hotel downtown, essentially, I brought a cop there at one point. At Armstrong Hotel had just finished all these renovations, and there was all this other fucking shit. Well, guess what? They were all gone. Everything was just set back. Now, it didn't occur to me when he's sitting there saying shit to me like, oh, see, how could it have been, blah, blah, blah. That's a dirty fucking cop. Okay? That it's a dirty fucking cop that fucking took me out there. Because I wasn't thinking in that level. I'd just been through something that was incredibly frustrating, incredibly strange, so on and so forth, and all these people were denying having ever fucking seen me, and I'd already been there, you know? And so on and so forth, these various little encounters had occurred, you know? So, eventually I started getting sick of that shit. We're not going to go into that. We're not going to go into the change that had in my demeanor at one particular point, all right? And the change essentially it's making me think about right now, for example, you know? With that nice wedged fucking asshole over there, for example, you know? Yes. And those shoes that just say, fuck me. Yes, fuck me because I'm a piece of shit, you know? Anyway, so, that being said, now, all that shit essentially happens, and it confuses people, because they come back and there's landmarks missing. Places where they might have been hurt are missing. Places where the actual crime had been happened could have been torn down. And very frequently, that's probably the case. Somebody comes back looking and it's not there anymore, you know? Or everything's in a different state, or the same people are there, or they haven't heard of certain people, or so on and so forth, or this person's always been there, or all this other crap. And while it would be suspicious as hell once you start to mount up a number of people who return and fucking say shit like that to any member of decent or honest law enforcement, they've kind of taken that to account and already replaced all the decent fucking law enforcement with something else. The other thing is, too, is that it stores specific sets of knowledge, essentially, for an individual who represses everything. So if I don't see all the same fucking people at the same time, in the same places, or I don't see all the same kind of events, all the cues, essentially, which are going to start restoring some pretty large knowledge structures are not necessarily there. Lamentably for me, they have chosen to remind me of the fact that they are child molesting fucking garbage with copies of fucking the original fucking kids, so on and so forth, which they are selling to each other or trading for fucking money, sex, and fucking property, or just because they just enjoy fucking people around. Alright? Like that bitch has been here before. So, it's shit like that. This has created a considerable issue for me. And a lot of people, probably. A lot of younger people, too. But they can disguise it all by pretending, essentially, to anybody who's looking that it's only about one thing. Like, at one point, they told me that these people, at one point when they ran out of excuses, they told me that these people were like chummas and shit that were serving off their fucking sentences and were filling the need, essentially, the unspoken need, essentially, for escorts and the like, which is partially true. Like, when they tell half lies, essentially, it does make sense. What they don't tell you, essentially, is that, like, they're viewing this shit as capitalism. They just trade their whole fucking lives away so they can get what they want once in a while, and no one does anything to them that's severe, you know. There's a whole class, essentially, of victims that have actually become them, that have been bred for them, and everything else, you know. Whole bunch of ruined people. They're wandered around and fucking they act like this shit's normal for them. Like, oh, this is perfectly normal. This is just the way the world is, and always has been, and shit like that. I want you to understand that amongst a group of fucked up people, essentially, who are really twisted, evil fuckers, alright? That shit's funny. Like, this bitch is laughing. That shit's fucking funny, for example, number one. And number two, it's also very plausible, especially whenever you have infiltrated the police and anyone else that a fucking aware child, say, for example, could turn around and say, oh yeah, they did something to me, so on and so forth. And here the cop turns around and betrays them too. You know? It's all about fucking containment. The problem with containment is that containment gets them killed once in a while. You know? Containment gets them killed once in a while. That's the thing that is beautiful to me, that it gets them killed once in a while. That once in a while they push someone just a little too fucking rough, and that person walks up behind them with a baseball bat or a knife or a gun and cuts them from left to fucking right across their throat or bashes their head in like a fucking melon. You know, fun stuff like that. Anyway.